Watching the religious talk about evidence is really kind of a hoot. Evidence is not, well, it sounds good to me, which is pretty much all they care about. But I think they know that they ought to have evidence, so they purposely misunderstand what evidence is and why it is important. Then you get two theists having a personal conversation where other people can listen in, and it all comes tumbling down. They're trying, granted, but they're not trying nearly hard enough. So let's see where this all goes wrong. We're back today with Cave to the Cross Apologetics because why the heck not? It's another internal discussion on a podcast of some sort where the guy on the left, whoever he is, I have no idea who these people are, he talks to the guy on the right, no clue who he is, about things that they believe in common, as if those things are actually true in the real world. Now, I'd be happy for them to provide evidence for that, but they don't, because it's part of the religious echo chamber that they live in, and they don't have to defend themselves, at least they don't think that they do. Just about everybody watching also really wants to believe that's their intended audience. And it's too bad that we don't, because we're not part of their intended audience. We actually expect rational justification, which is what they're talking about today. So let's get to it.
And so this chapter gives us some common aspects of the evidentialist approach. And there are basically three that they want us to be aware of. First, evidentialists focus on inductive as opposed to deductive argumentation.
I know that we're going to quibble on a lot of things here, so don't get upset when I do. Let's go ahead and provide some basic explanations for the concepts that they're using, because I think it's unlikely that they're going to do so on their own. Now, there are a lot of ways to talk about this, and we're probably going to end up covering a whole bunch, but the most important difference, I think at least, between inductive and deductive reasoning is that inductive reasoning tries to develop an idea, whereas deductive reasoning tries to test an existing idea. Deductive reasoning is a top-down approach, moving from a general premise to a specific case, whereas inductive reasoning, it goes the other way. Now, I don't know where he's heading with this exactly, so I guess we should get back to it and hopefully get some more context.
Right, so they look at inductive because it's based on the facts of the world, right, and the facts of history, and so there's no way to give deductive evidence for facts of history is what they're arguing.
I guess? I mean, I suppose it depends on what evidence you have available. If I take, say, the Trojan War, since we've used this one before, and the only data that you have on the Trojan War are the Homeric epics, then you can only get so far in determining what is actually true and what is not out of the existing data set that you have. Some things, they're definitely, obviously not true, and others, we just don't know. And that's why we refuse to acknowledge that the Trojan War actually happened, because we had no evidence that it did until we did. We made archaeological discoveries which supported, at least in part, the Homeric narrative to some degree. So we admitted that there was sufficient evidence for some of it, but not all of it. There is no evidence for a Trojan horse, for example. It's possible that the city was attacked with battering rams with equine decorations, and that led to the stories, but we've got absolutely no way of knowing for sure, at least not now. That could change in the future. We don't know what we don't know, but at the moment, we can only go with what we know. There certainly is no evidence of any kind for any of the gods or goddesses or whatever that we're told about in the epics. There's no evidence for Helen of Troy. Although, I guess we probably wouldn't expect any, as women were basically commodities in the second millennium BCE. Although Carl Belgin did discover a lot of clay tablets at the Palace of Pylos in southwestern Greece, which talked about women being taken as slaves in Turkey and then being taken to Pylos and forced into labor, and that certainly could have been seen as evidence that women, or women captives, spurred the soldiers of their nation to come and try and get them back. We just don't know, and we really can't speculate too heavily, but I guess it's at least a possibility, but you can't say it happened for sure.
And so it focuses on induction as opposed to deduction. Secondly, since it focuses on induction, as a result of that, there's the focus on the probability of the conclusion of the argument, so that you don't have certainty because you're dealing with facts in the world or of the world.
If you're dealing with the demonstrable facts of the world, then you do have certainty, don't you? I mean, you have as close as you're likely to get. Facts are certain, relatively, or they aren't facts, right? Or at the very least, they are determined to such a degree that it's kind of a little silly to have serious doubts, I would assume, at least in the broader strokes. This is the problem with having lots of these videos that start in the middle of a conversation, or often in the middle of a sentence or a word, because you often don't get the larger context that they're talking about. Maybe it's going to become more clear as time goes on. I guess we'll have to see.
And so you have probability. And then thirdly, they argue that they want content neutral methods in order to examine the arguments. And so they use, historical methods, legal methods, and scientific methods as they consider their various arguments.
That I will agree with. I'll put it another way. I want something that can be validated outside of your head instead of something where I have to rely on your personal interpretations or feelings or desires about the matter to get information. I don't care what your book says. I care what I can go out and find independently about what your book says. It's like I always say, I care about science. I don't care about scientists. Just because a scientist says something, that doesn't make that thing true. Only the data that the scientist used to come to that conclusion matters. And the same thing goes for the religious. I don't care about your faith. I don't care what you believe. I care only what you can demonstrate. And sadly, in this case, they can't demonstrate anything. Just because a scientist or a theist says something, that doesn't make that thing true. Only the data does. And I need to be able to, at least in theory, go and verify their findings on my own. Or at least have other people do it in my stead. People that I trust to do a good job. The data has to speak for itself. I don't want to have to take somebody's word for it. If it's possible to go out and verify it on its own merits, I need to be able to do that. If it's not, I'm not going to believe it. It's the capacity to do the work myself, or like I said, have others do it in my stead, that matters, even if I don't do so in all or even most circumstances. The people don't matter. It's the evidence that does.
So those are the three main, aspects that our authors want us to know about how evidentialist apologetics work.
Well, apologetics are pointless, so who cares? I don't care what message you're trying to push. I care if your talking points are demonstrably and factually correct. This is why we work so hard to verify these things in the first place. This is why we don't take your word for it. This is why we don't take faith seriously. We don't accept tradition in place of demonstrated fact, etc. Now, I understand that this is an echo chamber and they aren't talking to everybody. They're only talking to one group of delusional wingnuts versus another group of delusional wingnuts. But maybe if we look hard enough, we can get something out of it, if in no other way than just seeing why these people are so wrong. So, guy on the left, Please continue.
Now we reach kind of an objection to the evidentialist's position, right? And this is, the postmodern challenge to evidentialism is what our authors want us to pay attention to.
Now, I am not a fan of postmodernism at all, and I think it's kind of stupid in a lot of ways. But again, this is one of those places where different people mean different things in different ways about different ideas, so it's really hard to keep it all straight. Some of the fundamental tenets of postmodernism require that people question everything just for the sake of questioning it, and that's fine, that's basic skepticism. It doesn't matter if it's factually true or not, they just have to question it. And in that case, I think it is one of the few places where extreme skepticism is accurately being used. Except if you think about it, it's not even skepticism. It's just throwing out everything so you can come up with your own ideas, factually true or not, just because you really want to feel like you're in control. And that is really stupid. This is where the whole your truth thing comes from. You know, the whole crap Oprah was tossing around for a while. It's dumb. It's just complete nonsense.
So what is the postmodern challenge to evidentialism? Well, they tell us that evidentialist apologetics seeks to present evidence for the truth of Christianity using methods of inquiry that are in principle acceptable to non-Christians, right? That's what we saw.
I don't necessarily buy that. Now, granted, he's still talking about fuzzy stuff there, and we have no specifics, but I haven't seen anything that comes out of religion, and I mean any religion, that I would agree is fundamentally worthwhile for discovering the truth behind that religion, at least any of the supernatural claims of that religion. I can look in the Bible and say, yep, I accept all the places that are mentioned that we have evidence for are real, because I do. It has nothing at all to do with the Bible. It has to do with the evidence. The Bible, the fact that it appears in the Bible is irrelevant. Those places are real because we have evidence those places are real. It has nothing to do with the claims. It has to do with the verifiable facts. And that's fine, but I don't think it gets them anywhere useful. It's like saying that just because New York City exists, that doesn't mean Spider-Man is real, or just because King's Cross Station exists in London, that doesn't mean a magical train from Hogwarts stops there. I'm still waiting for them to be able to bridge that divide, and let's be honest, they're not even trying.
This methodological approach has come under frontal assault from postmodernism. In essence, postmodernism denies the modernistic belief that there is an objective truth about the world that can be discovered using reason.
That was my complaint about it. Truth becomes meaningless because, let's be really honest, the postmodernists don't care. In that, they are just like the religious. Some of them go farther, which I think is even dumber. At least most Christians can point to the existence of, say, Jerusalem in the Bible as something that is demonstrably true. And I've seen postmodernists who go so far as to doubt the existence of reality. They don't act like it, as I've just had another discussion with a solipsist who kept saying, well, you can't prove reality exists. And I had to point out that that was an assumption we all make, and he made it too, since he was sitting there on the internet, which according to his beliefs isn't real, talking to people who don't exist for, well, no reason that he could possibly explain. Then he just vanished. Big surprise there. They don't want it pointed out that they are just being hypocrites, which they are.
According to postmodernists, truth is subjective, not objective. Our knowledge of reality is a construction that we kind of build up as we look at the world through our eyes and through the assumptions and experiences of our communities.
But isn't that what you're doing too? You believe the things in the Bible are true because your community, the community of believers, they say it's true. That doesn't make it true or anything, but they say it's true. And this is why I laugh when the Catholics, in particular, say, but the church says. Well, who the hell cares what the church says? Well, they do because that's their community. Their community says a thing. That thing has to be true because they'd feel really bad without their community. This is why I don't care about communities. I am not part of any community in that sense. When people say, well, you're part of the atheist community, I just laugh because I'm not. I'm me. If I share some things in common with other people, then great. For the sake of those things, we are part of the same metaphorical community. But that stops the second that agreement goes away. I am part of a local community with the next door neighbor insofar as our interests align. Outside of that, though, nope, I'm an island. That's how it works.
Right, and so that's kind of the postmodernist view, and of how truth is kind of gathered and understood.
And it's stupid. So far, I guess I'm in general agreement with the guy on the left. I really wish I had some clue who these people actually were if I actually cared enough to go find out, which I don't, but myself, I only care about coming to the most rational and evidentially justifiable positions that I possibly can, based on the best and most objectively verifiable evidence I can come up with, and no more. I don't care about your faith and your fifis at all. In fact, for a very long time now, I've been posting on my blog showing examples of one group of people complaining about another group of people. Well, they're just doing this one irrational thing. But if you look at both groups, they're both doing the exact same thing, just with regard to different positions. These people are not rationally consistent. They're just hypocrites. And that's hardly a surprise, is it?
So why is this then a challenge to the evidentialist?
Well, yes. So therein lies the problem for evidentialism. If there is no universally recognized way of determining the truth, the evidentialist project of presenting evidence using an accepted method of established discipline can't even get off the ground.
And this is why religion fails. This is why I have so many problems with the way the religious do things. Evidence does matter. We are never going to be on the same page if you're going to reject that. I reject faith entirely, as faith is not a demonstrable path to truth. You can have faith in absolutely anything, no matter how absurd it is, and without relying on evidence in some fashion to validate what you believe, then you may, and you very likely do, just believe nonsense. Now, granted, these people don't give a damn. They just don't care. They just want to believe because it gives them an emotional woody. But that is positively stupid. Anybody who comes to me and says that they don't care about reality, which a lot of them plainly do not, I just laugh in their face because we are simply not on the same intellectual playing ground. You might disagree, but if you can't come to terms with what is important, then I'm not going to play along. Go find yourself someone else with a lower epistemic standard, because that's not me. Sadly, there's a lot of those out there, and that's who these people are really targeting.
Because such accepted method no longer exists. So look, we're using the same method that you would use to convict a criminal of committing a crime, of a capital crime.
I hope that you wouldn't convict somebody of a capital crime based on the ridiculously terrible evidence that the religious try to trot out. Well, it says so in a book, or somebody wrote that down and I believe it even though I can't be independently corroborated anyway, but it's just got to be true. Yeah, we don't convict people based on faith, at least I hope not. Although leaving your fate in the hands of 12 people who weren't smart enough to get out of jury duty, that's probably not a good thing either. Because you notice what they're doing, and the religious try this a lot. They are trying to equate a jury trial to truth, and not, say, a scientific evaluation. Jury trials do not determine truth. This is guilty or not guilty. This is not guilty or innocence. There's no truth here. It's just a preponderance of the evidence, often badly. They just show that you can walk 12 people into a building, whether you have any evidence to back it up or not, and get those 12 people to sort of agree on something because they all want to go home. That's not impressive, I'm sorry. That's why a lot of trials get overturned, because there's a lot that can go wrong with the process, and people, whether anybody likes it or not, people can be really, really dumb. In fact, most are. That's why we shouldn't leave important decisions to the generally uninformed opinions of stupid people, which mostly we're doing that today. This is all that religion does, right? Well, it sounds good to me. Yeah, who the hell cares?
Of taking their life. We're saying, no, let's come alongside and use the same type of argumentation and representation of the evidence, and the conclusion has to be to this high degree of probability.
But it's not. Now, I'm not saying that you can't have really good, solid, objectively verifiable evidence in a court trial. In fact, that needs to be the expectation. Testimony is fine, so long as it can be corroborated by something else. Well, I saw X happen. Great. Can you even verify that you were there? Did the thing that you say happened leave any physical evidence behind? Just because you can raise your hand and swear to tell the truth, that doesn't mean that you will. That doesn't mean that the thing that you think is the truth is actually the truth. That doesn't mean that you even know the truth. We know that memory is inherently fallible. You might be convinced that you saw a thing, but that doesn't mean that you saw the thing that you claim that you saw. This is true for people who go out in the woods and say, I saw Bigfoot, or I saw aliens. That doesn't mean you saw Bigfoot or aliens. That means you saw a thing and your mind interpreted it in a way that was often emotionally comforting to you. This whole thing sounds a whole lot like religion, doesn't it? And that's not a good thing.
Or, no. Let's look at science. Science also has this problem of induction, but we're used to putting our trust into the scientific method, so that way when outcomes occur and we're able to reproduce it, we're able to have peer members also look at the methods and the outcomes, then we can have a high degree of confidence that we can put our seats into this combustional explosive power and move it along roadways, and you can be confident that it will continue to go and not blow up.
Sorry, but I like the guy on the left a lot more than I like the guy on the right. He just rambles a whole lot less. But yeah, you're just wrong here. We trust the scientific method because it demonstrably works. It's the demonstrably part that's important. You get in your car and it starts. I guess unless you don't maintain your vehicle properly, but that's a different thing. It operates reliably and as expected because physics doesn't change on a whim. Now, granted, a lot of people have very unrealistic expectations of science. They're looking for the same thing that they want out of religion, capital T truth. Something that exists forever and ever and always and never ever changes because they don't want to have to ever think about it again. But that's not how reality is, though. All knowledge is provisional, and I've made this point many times before. It doesn't matter what you want it to be, it matters what it is. You need to deal with reality as it is. You need to grow the hell up. We might think we have a really good handle on things, that something works consistently in this way or that way, but that doesn't mean it will always work consistently this way or that way when we gather more information. We've repeatedly tested it and the results are always the same, so we say, well, for the sake of argument, for the moment at least, that's how it works. Then we make some new discoveries and we find out that maybe we weren't quite right. In certain specific circumstances, it might work in a slightly different way. Then that gets absorbed into our views, and we have a much more complete picture of how reality works. Things always change because we always learn more. That's the way reality is. We will never know everything. If we did, we wouldn't need science anymore. Science is consistently growing and evolving as we learn more about the world around us. And that's a good thing. It's a feature, not a bug. We keep looking, we keep learning, we keep evolving. Our knowledge keeps getting better and better and better. It keeps getting more accurate. But that doesn't mean we will ever know everything, because every time we learn a thing, that opens another dozen questions of things we still have to learn. Our knowledge has been getting better and better. But you can't say that with religion, can you? Because they assert that they already know it all. They don't need anything else. They've already got everything. Their faith is perfect. Where they find out that they're wrong, well, they'll never admit that, will they? They'll just cover over it with blind faith and wishes and dreams because they're too busy asserting that they were right all along. The evidence never impinges on their magical thinking because they don't care. And I'm sorry, if you think that's a better system than science, then you've got some major things wrong with you upstairs. You are an idiot, and you really ought to knock that off.
That's all out the window then, right? So the objective method of discovering truth cannot be used with people who believe that truth isn't discovered but manufactured.
But that's really what the religious are doing, aren't they? They just won't acknowledge it. When you are relying on church tradition, that's manufactured. When you are relying on personal faith, that's manufactured. My book says a thing is just manufactured. You can't actually back any of this stuff up with something beyond your fifis and your faith. In actual reality, your feelings don't matter. And I know I use this a lot, but if you fall out of an airplane without a parachute, it doesn't matter how much you hate the idea of gravity. It still exists. It doesn't mean anything that you can scream all the way down that gravity isn't real. You're going to splat. That's the way it works, whether you like it or not. You don't matter in the equation at all. Your wishes and your dreams don't change reality, and whether you like it or not, this goes on for everything that happens in the natural world. You can't affect gravity, not on your own, not in your head. You can't affect heat, not on your own, not in your head. You can't just wish the weather away. You just don't have any power like that. It's time to grow up and deal with it. You can't just wish your imaginary friend into existence either. God either exists or doesn't. And I feel it will never demonstrate that God, any God, is actually real. You have to have something verifiable outside of yourself, and the religious never do. That's why they fare so badly in any discussion outside of their echo chamber. They just don't know how to deal with the real world.
So
Right.
where do you go from there?
Right. And so our authors tell us that in general, evidentialists make common cause with classical apologists in rejecting outright the relativism and subjectivism of postmodernism, but both acknowledge that the rationalistic ideal of modernism does deserve criticism, right?
We're going to stop right there, but I agree. It does deserve criticism. Now, in my opinion, there are a couple of things going on here. There is reality, that thing that actually exists around us, whether we like it or not. We can argue about the whole solipsism thing in the comments because there are some people who are just dumb. But those things are completely beyond you. Humans exist in the world that we exist in. Our feelings on the matter are entirely irrelevant. Then there are the things that the religious, in this case, they just really want to be true. They want there to be a God. They want their morality to be consistent. Stuff like that. They just want it. However, those things in the second case actually belong in the first case. They are things about reality that would be objectively true no matter what anybody wants. If there is a God, then there is a God. If there are no gods, then there are no gods. No matter what you believe, no matter what you want, your faith means exactly dick. This is a point that the religious have a really hard time coming to grips with, right? Just like hating gravity all the way down does absolutely nothing, hating that there is a God, if there is one, that does nothing. Believing in a God, if there isn't one, that also means nothing. The real trick is finding out which is actually the case, because faith doesn't mean anything. It's either there or it's not. And what you think about the thing that's there or not is completely irrelevant. How do you know? Not what you believe, not what you have faith in. How do you know? What are the best methodologies that we can use to demonstrate the facts one way or the other? Well, the ones that we have and the ones that we know work, well, they don't show that any gods exist at all, do they? The religious can't suggest any alternative methods that produce demonstrable results. They just play make-believe, and that's not acceptable. These people have problems, and they don't really care about any of it. They just want to believe. And that is not now, nor will it ever be in the future, enough. Of course, trying to get them to admit it, that's pretty much impossible because they've completely left the rational reservation behind. And that's kind of sad, isn't it?